Holy name. I have so much to share. I don't know where to begin, so I pray for your patience today. I think what I want to do is I want to go back to where we were on Wednesday at the Bible study, and then I'll see how the Lord leads me. I have a lot of scriptures to share today. So we'll start in Genesis chapter 10. Genesis chapter 10. I have a chart here. I don't know if you all will be able to see it or not. I'll see if I can copy it and bring it for Wednesday's Bible study, but it's nothing new. I've given you these charts before of the genealogy of Abraham. So in chapter 10 of Genesis, verse 1 says, "Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And unto them were the sons born after the flood." And it gives the names of the sons: Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Tyrus. So from these three sons, all the earth was populated. But I want to go back even further. I want to go to Genesis 9. What I try to do is use the scriptures and compare it or put it together along with some of the things that's going on in the news, so that the Bible can become more relevant to you. But in chapter 9 it says, "God blessed Noah and his sons, and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth." Now look at verse 6 and 7. It says, Whoso sheds man's blood, by man's shall his blood be shed. Underline this, what I wanted you to see in this verse. "For in the image of God made he man." Man was made in the image of God. Okay? Verse 7, God speaking to Noah, "And you be fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth, and multiply therein." Okay, look, drop down to verse 12. Talking about this rainbow now. God said, "This is the token of the covenant." So God made a covenant with Noah and all the inhabitants of the earth, really, "which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth." So I've been over these verses of scriptures many times, but the Bible is a living organism, so it speaks to us because the Bible is the Word is Jesus. So in this is a covenant. A covenant, God made a specific covenant. This one is a unique one between Noah and all humanity. That when you see the rainbow in the sky, you will know that that's a reminder of the covenant that God made. And he told Noah to replenish, to multiply on the earth. Now, there's a battle that's been going on for the 6,000 years that we know of biblical recorded history, which started back with Eve and Adam and the devil. So in this one here, God has already destroyed the world because of the wickedness. And now the only people, human beings, who was not perverted or corrupt that survived the flood was Noah and his three sons. And now he's telling them to replenish the earth, to multiply. Now, there was an article yesterday online from the Pope telling people to limit the amount of children that they have, for them to stop having so many children. That's what I'm trying to show you all, is evil is in the world. God made a covenant with Noah and his sons and told them to multiply and replenish the earth. So there's the synagogue of Satan, there's the church of Satan, and then there's the body of Christ, which is the church. Then God also made a covenant with Abraham and his descendants, and that's what this chart I just raised up showed you. I don't want anybody to be offended by what I'm trying to explain to you today, because if you are hanging there with me, you will see that God is no respecter of persons. All human beings were created by God. But the people from Genesis started worshiping and serving fallen angels and demon spirits and the host of heaven, the scriptures have said. And I've shown you those scriptures many times before. So what the Lord did, if you look at chapter 11 of Genesis, starting in verse 10, you see that it says, these are the generations of Shem. So if you look back in chapter 10, from 11 on down, you will see that there's 72 nations in the world from back since in Genesis time. These are the recognized 72 nations of people. Out of those 72 nations of people, most of those people serve demon spirits or fallen angels. Are you following me so far? So here in verse 10 of chapter 10, God starts with the genealogy of Shem. So we were taught that the people of color came from Ham and that they were cursed. But when you look at if you go through the Bible and you really research it and you study, you can see starting in chapter 12 of Genesis, God called Abraham out of all of the nations through the lineage of Shem. So I recently found a map, and I shared this map with you all on Wednesday, that there's a place in Africa called Negroland. And Negroland has a tribe located in Negroland called Judah. The Messiah came through the lineage of Judah. All throughout the biblical history, God made sure that there was a remnant of people who stayed faithful and committed to him. God's plan for Shem's lineage of people was that he would teach them about himself. This is after the flood now. People don't know about God because Genesis is already with Adam and Eve is already taking place. The people already became corrupt and perverted and stopped serving the God of Adam and Eve. And now they're worshiping other spirits and other gods. So God had to wipe everybody out, start all over again with Noah and his 3 sons. So now the history is tracking Noah and his 3 sons. But one specifically, Shem, he called Abraham out of Shem to create a whole nother group of people. We all know that God created a whole new group of people, but nobody really knows who those group of people are. And so now in 1948, they started the nation of Israel again. But we have recently discovered that the people in Israel who say that they are Jews may not be Jews, because we know that there are some Khazarians came from the Caucasus Mountain who migrated from the Caucasus Mountain, which would be the area of Russia and all of that, Ukraine and Crimea and Kazakhstan and all of that area, Turkey, Jordan, that area. Those people migrated into Israel and they established a nation, but that's not necessarily God establishing that nation, but we have embraced it as though it was God establishing the nation, because we thought we were the Gentiles, or people of color thought that they were the Gentiles, without understanding who you are. I wrote down a list of nations, just arbitrarily writing down the nations, and I wrote down Russia, Italy, Spain, France, Ireland, Afghanistan, China, Japan, Africa, the Caribbean, and all of these different. I'm not asking you, these are just nations that came to me. You can call on those people in various parts of those countries And they'll know their culture, they'll know some of their ancestors, they'll know about themselves. But the people of color in America don't know anything about themselves. They don't know which tribe, which location they came from. We just all mixed up. Now America itself have become a nation of mixed people from all over. So you can't really trace back who you were from. If you were Italian and you were born in America, you are an Italian American or a Spanish American or whatever. This is a nation of all mixed up people. Am I making sense to you? I have a lot to explain, and I hope I make it make sense to you. So now Abraham was called out of Chaldea, and God, through his son Jacob, Isaac, Esau and Jacob, he created a whole race of people. So Abraham had Isaac. Isaac had twins. One was considered of the flesh, and one was considered of the spirit. Jacob became Israel, and that's who God worked through and he created 12 nations through them, because Jacob had 12 sons, and God changed Jacob's name to Israel. Then there was the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, which was 10 and 2. The southern kingdom comprised of 2, which was Judah and Benjamin. The northern kingdom was the other 10 tribes that we don't read a whole lot about in scriptures, because God was creating his history through Judah. Judah was the nation that God made sure he kept pure, and he kept an eye on, and he navigated it through history. Am I making sense to you so far? All right. So now I'll go to scriptures. I want to start in the book of Acts. And we're going to be going back and forth all over everywhere. Acts chapter 17. Because I told you, God is no respecter of persons. Look at start at verse 24. It says, God that made the world. See, the creator God, he made the whole world and all things therein. Seeing that he is Lord of heaven and earth, dwells not in temples made with hands, neither is worshipped with men's hands as though he needed anything, seeing he giveth to all life and breath and all things, and has made of one blood all nations of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation, that they should seek the Lord, if haply they might feel after him, and find him, though he be not far from every one of us. Okay? Now I want to turn quickly back to Matthew to show you the genealogy of Jesus. Matthew chapter 1. This is condensed. I'm not getting into as much detail as possible or is available. I'm just trying to hit on a few spots to give you some idea. So look at verse 1. It says, Matthew chapter 1, verse 1, the book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. This is what I was saying to you before. Abraham begot Isaac, and Isaac begot Jacob, and Jacob begot Judas and his brethren. So you see, this is the generation, this is the lineage that God is highlighting. He's saying Jacob begot Judas, which is Judah, and brethren, because he got 11 other brethren. Okay? Now drop down to verse 17. And it says, so all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations. And from David until carrying away into Babylon are 14 generations. and from the carrying away into Babylon unto Christ are 14 generations. So all of those generations, people were keeping record. God was keeping record, and he was making sure that the records was being kept so that the people of Israel would be able to know their Messiah and who he was coming to the earth through. But when he came, they rejected him. And because they rejected him, they got scattered all over the world. And God is going to bring them back, but God is going to bring them back in his day and in his time. Am I making sense to you so far? All right, let's go back. I already showed you the Noahic or Noah's covenant. The covenant that was made with Noah was made between Noah and all human beings. Now let's go back to Genesis 12. I'm trying to give you some history. And I'm also trying to get you to condition yourself to not look at the world as it is, but look at the bigger picture. Because God has called you to be his witnesses, to be his light, to be his example in the earth. And not to get caught up into genealogy, into being angry and racist and prejudiced and militant and angry against people. We're supposed to bring light and love to the earth. We're supposed to be the people of God that God is revealing himself to, because I just showed you that God doesn't live in a temple that is made with hands. The Lord wanted people to get to know about who he was through Abraham and his descendants in the flesh before Jesus came to the earth. But they rejected him. I'm going to take you to Judges and show you some of that. Now God is showing himself through the church. I'm not saying that the church is replacing the Jews, because the church is not. Because I showed you, and I will go back there again in Romans 11, where blindness and part have come to the Jewish people because God wanted to create the body, the church. But when he gets through with the Gentiles and creating the church, which is comprised of both Jews and Gentiles, then he's going to start back dealing with the nation of Israel. But remember, I showed you in Revelation 2:9, God says he knows those people who say that they are Jews but are not. So there's people nowadays who are saying that they are Jews but they are not Jews. And the people who really are the Jews, God is still going to deal with those people because they worship and practice idolatry and they sacrifice their children to Baal. And I'm going to show you that as well. So in Genesis 12, verse 12, chapter 12, verse 1. Now the Lord has said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. Turn to chapter 15. Let's look at verse 5. Chapter 15 of Genesis. And let's look at starting at verse 5. It says, and he brought him forth, talking about the Lord bringing forth Abraham abroad, and said, look now toward heaven, and tell the stars, if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, so shall thy seed be. And he believed, Abraham believed in the Lord, and he counted it to Abraham for righteousness. And he said unto him, I am. You see how people trying to take I am refers to God, but that's all over the rock music, and everybody is trying to take on I am. What they're really saying is I am God. And that's part of the spiritual battle that is taking place today. I am the Lord that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees, to give thee this land to inherit it. So you see that Abraham came out of idolatry, and if you research where Ur and the Chaldeans were, they were idolatrous people. And he said, Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? Drop down to verse 17. It says, and it came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between the pieces of animals that God told him to cut up. And that same day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land. And then he names the places where he's given the land from. A covenant is an agreement between God and people. Not something that people initiate, but something that God initiates. So God initiated right here an agreement, and he cut it. That's this word, what he's saying. If you read the whole chapter, it says he told Abraham to cut the animals into pieces. That means he was cutting a covenant with Abraham, and that word in Hebrew would be berith, B-E-R-I-T-H, berith. God cut a covenant with Abraham. When God makes a promise with people, it can't be broken. No matter what the people do, God will find somebody in their lineage to make sure that God completes his agreement, his promise, and that's what he did with Abraham. Are you all following me so far? Okay, so God wanted to have Abraham and his son Isaac and Jacob and Jacob's descendants to be a people of him, of God, that God would come and visit with them and reveal himself to them. And then those people were supposed to tell the people around them about the Creator God. But instead of them doing that, what they did was they did everything God told them not to do. They got involved with those people around them. And instead of them telling them about their God, they started worshiping the other people's God. Am I making sense to you so far? We can see this a little bit in Judges. So let's turn to the book of Judges. Judges chapter 6. Actually, let's start at Judges chapter 2. Judges chapter 2. Remember, there's only going to be a remnant who's not going to go along with the rest of the world, who's going to pay attention. Judges chapter 2, let's look at verse 11. It says, and the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served Balaam. Balaam is plural for Baal. Okay? And you know that last year they had erected an arch in New York City, which was an arch of Baal. Okay, when you serve Baal, you sacrifice your children to demon spirits. And that's what Planned Parenthood is really all about. Sacrificing. I'm trying to relate it to today. Back in this time, what they would do is they had a big iron bull. And they would heat it up, and it would be really hot, and they would throw their infant babies into that bowl, which was called Moloch. That was child sacrificing. Today, child sacrificing is Planned Parenthood, and the people selling children all over the world into sex slave and all type of things that they selling children today. As we sit here speaking, children are being sold into slavery, and they're sacrificing the children. The same thing now that was happening back in this time. Am I making sense to you? But because we didn't live back here, we don't recognize what it looks like today. Okay? And I'm telling you all of this stuff, hopefully that at the end of me giving you all of these various scriptures, you will come to really appreciate and value what Jesus Christ did in the earth. All right? Okay, so now let's turn to Judges chapter 6. It's another witness of the same thing. Judges chapter 6. And let's look at verse 32. It says, therefore on that day he called him Jerubbaal, saying, let Baal plead against him, because he has thrown down his altar. Then all the Midianites and the Amalekites and the children of the east were gathered together and went over and pitched in the valley of Jezreel. But the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, and Abiezer was gathered after him. And he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, who also was gathered after him. And he sent messengers unto Asher. See, these are the tribes. And I want to go back to Judges 3. I'm sorry, I meant to go to Judges 3. But Gideon was who God used to deliver the children. Judges chapter 3, and let's look at verse 5. And these are the children of Ham that we are about to read about. Verse 5 of Judges 3. It says, and the children of Israel dwelt among the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And they took their daughters, underline, they took their daughters to be their wives, and gave their daughters to their sons, and served their gods. See, they did the opposite of what God told them to do. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. That was considered evil in the sight of the Lord. And they forgot the Lord their God and served Balaam. Remember, Balaam is plural for many different kinds of demonic entities, and the groves. Therefore, the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel. And he, underlined, he sold them into the hand of Shushan. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce all of that. In Mesopotamia. Am I making sense to you so far? You see that they did evil. They married into the people who were around them, that they were supposed to be the light and the witness and the example, and teach them, these other people, they were supposed to teach about Jehovah God, the Creator God. Now chapter 10 of Judges. This one is interesting. Chapter 10. Look at verse 6. It says, and the children of Israel did evil again and again. You see the word again. See, pay attention to these words when you read. The children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and served Balaam and Ashtaroth and the gods of Syria and the gods of Zidon and the gods of Moab and the gods of the children of Ammon, and the gods of the Philistines, and forsook the Lord, and served not him. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he sold them into the hands of the Philistines, and into the hands of the children of Ammon. And that year they vexed and oppressed the children of Israel. Look at this. 18 years. All the children of Israel that were on the other side of Jordan in the land of the Amorites, which is Gilead. They all throughout the Bible, that's what the history is, that God would deliver the people, then they would go right back into serving the other gods or the other evil spirits. Am I making sense to you? The same thing is happening today. Only thing what we see taking place today, because if anyone in this room or at the sound of my voice is over 40 years old, even younger, you have lived long enough to see a huge change take place, where darkness now is prevalent, and people are calling good evil and evil good. And the Bible tells us that there was going to come a time when that was going to take place. Okay? Am I making sense to you so far? Now let's go to Romans chapter 11. Are you getting anything out of this so far? Romans chapter 11. Let's start at verse 1. I say then, Paul is speaking, has God cast away his people? God forbid. For I also am an Israelite, of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. You see, it was, remember, the southern tribe was Benjamin and Judah. So here God is using Paul from the tribe of Benjamin again to go to the Gentiles. And he's saying, but God has not forgotten the Israelites. God has not cast away his people which he foreknew. What you not what the scripture says of Elias, how he makes intercession to God against Israel, saying, Lord, they have killed thy prophets and dig down thine altars, and I am left alone, and they seek my life. That's how you're going to feel when you serving God. There's not going to be a lot of people around you that you can connect with who's going to remain faithful. But what says the answer of God unto him? I have reserved to myself 7,000 men, of whom have not bowed the knee to the image of Baal. Have you bowed your knee to the image of Baal? I'm trying to make this present time. Even so then, at this present time, also there is a remnant according to the election of grace. So grace, we are saved by grace. Now drop down to verse 25, chapter 11. And look at verse 25. It says, for I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part is happened to Israel, until the fullness of the Gentile be come in. And so all Israel, talking about the nation of Israel, shall be saved, as it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. So Jacob now is blind. Those who are the real children of God through Jacob, they are blind until God gets through dealing or building up his church. The church, I'm going to say it again and I'm going to keep saying it, is comprised of both Gentiles and Jews. Okay? For this is my covenant unto them. See the covenant? The word covenant again. When I shall take away their sins. As concerning the gospel, they are enemies for your sakes. But as touching the election, they are beloved for the Father's sake. For the gifts and calling of God are without repentance. God don't change his mind once he enter into a covenant. For as you in times past have not believed God, yet have now obtained mercy through their unbelief. Because of their unbelief, the rest of the world got to obtain mercy. Not the way God had initially intended it to be. Because initially he had intended the people, the nation of Israel, to tell the world about him. But now he's using the church to tell the world about him. But he is still in agreement with Israel. So don't ever think the church is a replacement of Israel. I'm not telling you who Israel is, who the Jews are, but I'm telling you what I don't think is the people who's living in Israel now. I don't think the people of God is going to be living in Israel until Jesus is living there with them. Because he knows who they are, and he's going to call them from all over the world. There's going to be a natural Israel who inherit the natural physical world, and we are spiritual Israel who's part of the church, which is comprised of both Jews and Gentiles. Am I making sense? I'm going to show you where God says he's going to save all who calls upon the name of the Lord. Let's go to chapter 10. To those of you who listen and faithful to come every week after week, I'm sure this would make more sense, the things that I'm sharing with you, than someone who just hearing me for the first time, because I tend to build on whatever I did the week before, the week before, the week before, and God just keeps building and building and revealing and revealing. So I apologize to whoever's listening that's not able to follow along, but if you continue to follow week after week after week, it'll start to click and make sense to you, because a lot of this information is so deep and it's so much information that you're not going to be able to, if you are hearing it for the first time, be able to necessarily grasp it all. And one of the points I'm trying to make is, and this is not intended to offend anybody, but people of color don't understand who they are and how much God loved them enough that he called them out of darkness, and he wanted to use them to create a whole race of people that would love him and honor him and serve him. Now he's made it possible for everybody to be able to love him and serve him, and he's no respecter of persons. It's just that the people who are of color don't realize who they are. They've been scattered and sold all over the world because of their rebellious and their disobedience to the Creator God. God is holy, God is righteous, and he is sovereign, and he's going to keep his word, and he expects for those. That's part of the covenant. The covenant is, I made an agreement with you, and if you keep your end of the bargain, I'm going to keep my end of the bargain. But even if you don't keep your end of the bargain, I'll find somebody in this generation or in your lineage who will. God keeps his word. It's up to us to enter into an agreement with him and keep our end of it, so that we can get the part of the covenant that he is willing to give to those who's willing to keep his word. Am I making sense? That's part of what I'm trying to show you. So we don't get caught up in I'm black and I'm an Israelite and I'm going to I'm black and I'm proud kind of things. I'm a Christian and I'm a child of the Most High God, and that should supersede any ethnicity. Am I making sense to you? So don't get caught up in all of this stuff. This would be sort of a continuation of what I was telling you about the Saul Alinsky things, rules for radicals, where it's a demonic doctrine that the enemy is using to hijack people's soul and lead them to hell through chaos and being militant and being basically stupid, in my opinion. Am I making sense, for a lack of a better choice of words? So chapter 10 of Romans, verse 1 says, "Brethren," Paul speaking, "my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they might be saved," because they are lost right now. "For I bear them record that they have a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. For they, being ignorant of God's righteousness and going about to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God," the way God has made available for people to be made right. "For Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone that believes." The law ended with Christ. So those who are scattered abroad and lost, a lot of those people are practicing voodoo and